And the 12th Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization has begun, from food security to patent waiver on vaccines. Everything will be discussed. But on this edition of Climate Tracker, our focus is on fisheries subsidies. Let's begin by telling you what exactly fisheries subsidies is. It is a plan by governments to support consumers and fishermen extract fish. This helps supplement their income or even lower the cost. But this has a huge downside for the environment. Habitat degradation, overfishing, pollution and climate change are exacerbated by this. These are vital for livelihoods, food security and a healthy planet. Experts say that insufficient data on ocean governance blurs the reality further. So the WTO has decided to act upon this. Their solution is to eliminate the subsidies entirely. A draft agreement has been released which claims that this is a cleaner solution and should be discussed upon. The agreement also states that members should not be negotiating against each other, but against the unrelenting depletion of global fish stocks. This is easier said than done because it seems like the agreement is discriminating against developing countries, the very nations that contribute the least to climate change. India has rejected the draft and say that it will not back down from putting forth its demands. Fisheries are a key source of protein and livelihoods for millions in India. While fisheries subsidies bring its own concerns, it will be wrong to draw parallels between a fisherman from India and that of the United States.
Yeah, the subsidies are very much essential for the Indian fishing community because the fishing what we are doing for traditions, for the ages, is that the small scale fishing, and it is in nowhere in India we are doing the industrial type of fishing. Okay. And we are preserving the marine species, and every precautions and measures we are taking to ensure the fishing stocks never get depleted. And that's why if you consider most of the other international waters, the fishing stocks are coming down, but in India, around India, in Arabian Sea or Bay of Bengal or Indian Ocean, the fishing stocks are still there.
Well, New Delhi is not a major fishery subsidy provider. Countries like China, the European Union and the US provide a far greater annual fishery subsidy. On your screens are the latest figures, but India stands at just $277 million. The ambassador to the WTO said in a statement, and I quote, "This is a problem created by others, and countries like India are being asked to take responsibility for their mess. India wants safety net for Indian fishermen who aren't into distant water fishing." The draft also allows only 7 years transition period for developing countries, as against to India's proposal that demanded 25 years. To say the least, negotiations are set to be complex and long. It is important to understand that the WTO doesn't work like the United Nations. The members do not vote in favor or against a proposition, whereas it believes in the principle of consensus. So 164 members will have to negotiate and find a middle ground. Well, let's talk more about this, and Damodar Pujari, who is a fellow for Climate Change Studies Program at Gateway House, is joining us from Mumbai. Pujari, welcome to WION.
Thank you.
Now, global marine fish stocks have fallen to levels that are biologically unsustainable. Can you explain to our viewers how fisheries subsidies affect the environment?
Yeah, so you're right. Global fishing stocks have been depleting substantially. Around 65% of global fishing stocks are only being exploited sustainably, and rest of that is 2/3 of the fishing stocks are being harvested unsustainably. Largely, if we talk about the subsidies, they fall under two broad categories. One is capacity or enabling subsidies, that are the subsidies for vessels, for fuel and other issues that are not directly given to the individual beneficiaries. And second are the individual beneficiary related subsidies that are given to the fishing communities. India largely provides the subsidies for the first category, that is enabling ones, and that too in the small amount. As far as subsidies and the degradation of environment is concerned, there are three main aspects that need to be clearly understood. One is that due to the higher amounts of individual as well as both the types of individual and capacity enabling subsidies, the fishing vessels at an industrial scale can surpass their exclusive economic zones of the countries, start fishing in the open waters, often going beyond their territorial waters, and degrade the stock. Overfishing has been a common problem. We need to understand that overfishing means the fishing beyond the sustainable or replenishment levels of the natural system. So therefore, because of unsustainably exploiting the fisheries, we are reducing the stocks and preventing, or rather eliminating, the future generations' ability to continue to harvest these stocks. So this is, how largely the subsidies are contributing to the degradation of environment. There is a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, the entire goal number 14 talks of these kinds of unsustainable practices and urge countries to eliminate the financial mechanisms that contribute to unsustainable fisheries.
Pujari, let me ask you this and be brief on it. The World Trade Organization is pushing to eliminate subsidies under the draft agreement, but India has stuck to its tough stance that subsidies help poor fishermen stay afloat. Do you think WTO's proposition is favoring only the richer countries?
It is actually, because it does not talk about the capacity enhancing measures in detail that need to be provided to the least developed countries and least developed countries and developing countries in specific. Second, it also provides them a very small time window of 7 years for a transition. In fact, if you look at the quantum of subsidies provided by the developed countries to their fishing communities, they are substantially higher, and your report had just quoted them to be in the range of $1 billion, whereas the countries like India provide the subsidies for about $272 million. So in a way, it is non-specific, because it does not take into account the areas in which overfishing occurs. If you look at areas such as Mediterranean Sea and other and nearby adjoining areas, this is where most of the overfishing happens. Second, it also does not take into account the species that get overfished. And lastly, given India's tough stand on the more or the longer time window for developing countries, it is in no way an indication that India is not committed to sustainable fishing. In fact, India is working with other multilateral agencies like Quad to prevent overfishing and exploitative fishing practices that are ongoing in Indo-Pacific. So I believe India's stance is very much aligned to the developmental requirements of its own. However, it does not in any way degrade its commitment to the environmental cause.
All right. Thank you very much. I've been talking to Damodar Pujari, who is a fellow for Climate Change Studies Program at Gateway House. Thank you very much for making time and for talking to WION today.
Thank you. Pleasure speaking to you. Have a nice day.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.